We'll call the Senate Education Committee meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. The Secretary will take a silent roll. We have an interesting agenda today. First of all, some minutes to approve. Senator Nelson.
Mr. Chairman, I have reviewed the minutes of December 19th, 2022 and find them accurate and move that we approve them.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Senator Den Hartog. Thank you. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes of January 19th, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Next, we have an RS 29340. Senator Den Hartog, you want to do it from your chair?
Yes, please, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, as I'm looking through my packet here, I'm not seeing. I see the new RS in our packet. I do have the statement of purpose. I think I've talked to most committee members. This is a reprint of the Empowering Parents Grant Program that you graciously offered to print last week. We had some feedback and some language that was causing concern for some folks and made some slight modifications. There was a whole section that we removed related to parents' rights to intervene. That whole section was removed. The other changes that were made to the IRS were minor clarifications related to, one of them was around eligible education expenses, and the other was a clarification on how the accounts work on the digital platform. So I know I haven't talked to all committee members about the changes, but if the committee decides to reprint this piece of legislation, would be happy to address those in the full hearing and or visit with you ahead of time. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I stand for any questions.
Thanks, Senator Den Hartog. Any questions or motions? Senator Cook.
For a motion?
In order.
I move to send this to a print hearing.
Yes. To print says to introduce. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, it's been moved and second to introduce RS 29340 to print. A discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes, and it will be sent to print. We'll have a hearing at a later date. Thank you, Senators. Next, we have Clay Long, Administrator of the Division of Career and Technical Education. It's nice to have you in committee. Please introduce yourself and whom you represent. And I think you have a bill for us.
I do. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Clay Long, State Administrator for the Division of Career Technical Education. I'm here to visit with you about Senate 1247, and this is relating to Career Technical School Added Cost Funding. Idaho Code Section 331002G allows for school districts to establish career technical schools that give them access to additional career technical education funds. Through an annual review and looking at our programs in schools, it was recognized that cooperative service agencies are not included in the list of eligible recipients. So this change or modification adds cooperative service agencies to the eligible recipients for career technical school funding. Two examples of a career tech or a cooperative service agency would be K-Tech up in Coeur d'Alene, where multiple school districts come together, offer services as one entity, or CASA out in Wilder, again bringing multiple school districts together to offer a service, an educational service. The change to the to code is adding cooperative service agencies as being eligible. To be eligible, form pursuant to Section 33317 of Idaho Code, they must own or maintain a facility separate from any other member school district making up the cooperative service agency. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Director Long. Do we have any questions? I'll just state that I'm the chairman of a career technical education charter school, and this added cost funding is quite helpful and essential in getting some of the equipment and supplies needed for those career technical education programs. So, ready for a motion if there's, or a question. Senator Den Hartog.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. We had a couple of examples that were provided, and I think you were just talking about those. So since we haven't had this language in place, have these schools not been receiving the additional funding?
Director Long.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, they have been receiving those funds. We identified it over the last 2 years that they were receiving them and not eligible because they weren't an independent district, and that's why we're bringing it forward for a request to change.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Long, just a clarification. So I'm glad to hear that. I'm aware of some of these schools, and I know they do a lot of great work. It's a little concerning to me that this may be my pitch for a funding formula, but that we could be distributing funds where we didn't have something authorized in code, and this seems like a pretty big glaring hole that we have missed over the years, because I think CASA has been around for, I don't know if I could wager, I guess 20, 25 years. I know they've been there quite a long time, but so I'm glad to hear they've received the funding, and I'm happy to support. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Den Hartog. Senator Nelson.
For a motion,
No motions in order.
I move that we send Senate Bill 1247 to the floor with a due pass recommendation.
It's been moved and seconded that we send Senate Bill 1247 to the floor with a due pass recommendation. Senator Nelson, I'll give you a chance to talk about it if you want or not.
I think Mr. Long or Dr. Long has done very well.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor of sending Senate Bill 1247 to the floor with the due pass recommendation, please say aye. 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 Any opposed? That motion passes. Senator Nelson, would you like to carry that on the floor? Okay. Thank you. Next, we have a presentation. Thank you, Dr. Long, for being in front of the committee today. I think we might even see you tomorrow with some students. So we'll look forward to that. Next, we have a presentation by Jen Thompson, the Director of the Idaho Public Charter School Commission. Jen, welcome to the committee. I know we put you off the other day, so I'm glad you could come back.
Is that better?
Yes, that's better.
Great. Thank you. Chairman Thane and members of the committee, for the record, my name is Jen Thompson. I'm the director for the Public Charter School Commission. I'm here today to just share a little bit about our FY21 annual report and give you just a brief overview of what we've been doing in the Charter Commission over the last year. I'm going to start with just this slide. Some of you have seen this before. I talked about this a little bit in JFAC a week or so ago. So you can see the red line here is growth of charter schools over time. You can see that trajectory is a little steep. Also wanted to point out, and last year, Senate Bill 1115 assisted us in transitioning to our own agency. So we've had some new challenges and changes on our team, and that's been great. So we currently serve 57 schools across the state. We have 6 schools that are approved to open over the next 2 years, and 10 petitions that I am aware are on their way to us over the next year. So we are going to continue to grow. Last year, we served about 29,000 students in charter schools in the state of Idaho. That's about 8% of the publicly educated students choosing charters in our state. Across the country, we see that land about 7 to 10 or 7 to 12%. So 8% is right about where we would expect to be. And I'm going to just flip backwards for just a second here. So even though we are growing at a pretty rapid pace, that 8% has really only grown about 1.5% over the last 5 years. So we are keeping pace with the population growth in our state. I know most of you know our commissioners, but just as a quick review, Alan Reed serves as our chairman, Sherilyn Bear serves as our vice chairman, and we do have a vacant seat at this time. I'm going to jump right into some of the data, and I'm not going to talk too deeply about the data that you'll see here. You have in your packets a copy of the PDF of our report, and these charts are in that PDF just vertically aligned. I laid them flat so they'd fit on the slide here, just to make it a little easier to talk about. So really what I wanted to do is just share with you how to read these charts, and then we'll, if you have questions, happy to answer those or follow up later. So you'll notice this is math ISAT proficiency for the charter schools that we authorize. The blue bars here indicate that the school has met the minimum meet standard mark, and that's established through the Charter Commission's performance framework. So the orange dots here represent the minimum meet standard mark, and then you'll see the brown line across the top. That's the statewide accountability goal that's established through our ESSA plan. So we like to think about that with our schools as a minimum meet standard and then a reach goal, so that we're always helping them look forward to the next step. The gray bars that you'll see here are schools that have not yet met that minimum meet standard mark. This is problematic because obviously charters function on a 5-year operating term, and those terms have to be renewed based on the terms of that contract. So when we get to the end of 5 years, we want to make sure that our schools are meeting that minimum meet standard mark. So the schools that we tend to work with the most are the ones where you'll see the biggest gap between where the gray bar ends and where the orange dart lands. We want to make sure that those schools and their governing boards really understand the importance of staying focused on those targets. So you've got our math proficiency here. The ELA proficiency reads the same way. You've got the orange dots are the minimum meet standard. The brown line is the reach goal. You can see we have a couple of schools here that we want to work with more specifically. Monticello Montessori, you'll notice, has a pretty big gap in that space. When we look at the IRI data, that reads a little bit differently, and I'm sorry, I see you all looking at very tiny charts on your packets. I should have brought you handouts with larger pictures. I'm sorry. The brown dashes on this chart, those are the minimum meet standard mark with the IRI data. So we want to see our schools hitting that minimum meet standard mark. The orange dots on this chart represent the change in proficiency from fall to spring. And so you'll notice, you can see on some of these, we've got some orange dots in this white space. That's learning loss. That's where we want to focus the most on helping our schools make some significant achievement. You'll notice, and you can just barely see this one here, we've got one school in particular that has a really big gap, but also pretty significant learning loss. And that's a school that we want to work with very closely to make sure they understand the gap they need to close before they come up for a renewal decision next. We've done a lot of work in revising the look and feel of our annual performance reports. This is just a sample of what those annual performance reports look like. The charts on the left of that slide are just your basic math proficiency and ELA proficiency. For this particular school, we're looking at the school's performance rate. Maybe I should do this over here. We're looking at the school's performance rate. We're looking at that as compared to a comparison group of schools with similar demographics. And then we're also looking for this particular school, because this school serves almost entirely an economically disadvantaged student population. We're looking at that economically disadvantaged subgroup as well. So we're trying really hard to make sure that we're looking at apples to apples comparisons when we're looking at our schools. So 20%, 31%, not a high achieving school by any stretch of the means, but a school that is outperforming other schools with similar demographics and outperforming the subgroup for economically disadvantaged students. So certainly some good things happening there.
Ms. Thompson?
Yes, sir.
Question. So on the middle chart where it's other comparable schools, is that other charter schools or other regular public schools, or What kind of schools is it comparing with?
Thank you, Chairman Thane. That's a great question. So we have used, we've looked across, for this particular school, it's a mix of both traditional schools and charter schools. So we're looking at the demographic makeup of the school, percentage of economically disadvantaged, percentage of special education, and then seeking out schools with a similar grade range and a similar configuration. So it's between 5-7 schools that we're pulling together just to try and create something that is meaningful in terms of comparison.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. The larger chart on this slide is the one that I really wanted to draw attention to. You'll notice that the fall scores, so there's the fall IRI and then the spring IRI assessment, and the line in between is the change from fall to spring. You'll notice that the blue line there, the school, Heritage Academy, their growth, their change in proficiency is one of the biggest gaps in the state. So they made more gains than almost any other school in the state of Idaho last year during COVID with almost an entirely economically disadvantaged student population. So definitely they have some good things happening at this school that we want to make sure we're paying attention to and thinking about, even though the proficiency scores might not be as high as we'd like.
Got a question from Senator Cook.
Yep.
Thank you. Do we know what they did, that they had such a change?
Ms. Thompson?
Thank you, Senator Thane and Senator Cook. You know, my intent was to have them here to speak more specifically to that question, but we were not able to reschedule that attendance. I can get some more information on that. I know they're working with the State Department of Education and through some mentorship programs on some of the things they're implementing. I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer for that. Okay. So I'm going to move on to this next slide here. This is a snapshot of our alternative measures. So when we revised our framework, we were able to really think deeply about how we're serving at-risk students and what kinds of data, what kinds of measures will help us understand how well our schools are serving at-risk students. And so one of the conclusions we came to was a need to add some supplementary measures to the standard measures. So we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Certainly proficiency rate is an important data point, but it is only one data point. What we know about at-risk students is that they don't often test well. A snapshot on any given one single day is not going to tell us as much as we need to really understand about those students. They may just have had a bad day. So we wanted to make sure we have some supplementary measures to give us a little more data. In this case, we're looking at content mastery. So although the students at this school, 50% of them performed proficient on the ELA assessment, and this is a population of students who all meet the statutory definition of at-risk. 50% of them achieved proficiency on the test, which is higher, significantly higher than the average proficiency rate at the alternative schools across the state. So in and of itself, that's a pretty nice achievement. But we also want to look at across time, how did those students do? So maybe they didn't do well on one single day, but over the course of the year, were they able to master the content of that course? And so these graphs all address the same student set. So 50% of them achieved proficiency, but 64% of them, so about 15% more, of those students were able to complete the course, master the content of the course over time. So they are getting that information. They are mastering those standards. We've added a couple of other alternative supplementary measures as well, one that helps us think a little more about progress toward graduation with our students who are not continuously enrolled. Another thing we know about at-risk students is that we have high turnover. They stay for a while, but they tend to move around a lot. And so we want to think about a school that's serving at-risk students. How are they serving them, even if they only have them for a little while? And so this measure helps us look at that. And then we also have developed a graduation measure that helps us look at 6 and 7 year students. So we'll capture students who graduate in 4 years and in 5 years in our traditional ACGR measures. But our additional alternative graduation measure allows us to think about those students who are in the 6th or 7th year and still celebrate that graduation for those students in that school. I know we talk a lot about academic data. That tends to be the one that folks focus on a lot. But if a charter school is going to fail or struggle, it's almost always going to land in the financial area. And so our performance framework looks not only at academic measures, but also at financial and operational measures. So I like to think of this is the flames. This is where we'll see fire, if there is fire to be found. But we worked really hard to make sure that this data is accessible to the public. So these are super simplified charts. And the thought behind this is that not every governing board member has an accounting background. And so we want to make sure that they're able to look at this and say, okay, we have more assets than liabilities. That's good. Or if we have more liabilities than assets, or that's getting to be an uncomfortable balance, then there are questions that need to be asked from a governing board's perspective. We really want to be able to empower those governing boards to make good, solid local decisions. We look at 8 measures. This is just a sample of what a couple of schools are looking at. So if this is the flames, then this is the smoke. The operational measures are the measures that personally I think are maybe among the most important. And this really helps us think about how well the governing board is functioning. Do they have their documentation in order? Are they abiding by ethics in government? Are they providing effective oversight and policy for their team? We also want to think about some of those operational things at a deeper level. But this is where we'll start to see if there are problems brewing that will later down the line lead to issues in financial and academics. And so we do want to make sure that our framework looks at all of these things. So I realize that was a really fast overview of a whole lot of data at the end of the day. Happy to answer any questions you have. And
Senator Cook.
Thank you. Right at the front, you talked about charter schools that didn't meet the proficiency level within 5 years. What do you do if it's been 5 years and they haven't met it? How do you work with them?
Ms. Thompson.
Thank you, Chairman Thain, Senator Cook. So that's a really interesting question. So essentially, the commission itself has the authority to make decisions on 2 occasions. So they can make decisions to approve or deny new charter school applications. And then every 5 years thereafter, they can make decisions to renew or to approve or deny renewal applications. That's where the commission has its authority to take any action. In between those decision points, my staff and I work with schools to make sure they understand where they stand in terms of the standards and metrics and measures they agreed to meet when they signed their operating contract. And so we're constantly working with schools to help make sure they know they have access to those resources. When we get to a renewal decision, if a school has not met one or more of those standards, the commission may consider a conditional renewal or they may consider non-renewal.
I've got a question that has to do with the long bar chart. It's had the different charter schools, back toward the front. Mm-hmm. So is there a difference between demographics between, the ones on the right, the ones on the left? Can you comment a little bit on poverty, some of those things?
Yeah, thank you. Chairman Thain, that's a good question. I think we want to think about this in terms of which of our schools, from the commission's perspective, which of our schools need the most attention, right? So we do want to see them all together. But the reason why those orange dots are there is so that we can think about how does, if we're going to say Forge International, how does Forge International School compare to schools that are like Forge International? So that demographic comparison is between the bar and the orange dot. That's where we have similarity in demographics for every single school that's listed on this chart. Across between them, they're different in a lot of different ways, but there's not necessarily a correlation between being low end of the chart and having any specific demographic makeup.
So I didn't understand, I guess, the yellow dot.
Mm-hmm.
Explain that again.
Yep. So the Charter Commission is required by statute to establish a performance certificate with a framework. And that framework outlines the measures and metrics that a school must achieve in order to continue its operations. In doing so, the framework that the Commission has adopted requires a school to perform as well or better than its comparison group. And so that comparison group is what is represented there. So the average proficiency rate of that comparison group. For most schools, that's going to be the traditional school district in which that school is physically located. For a couple of schools that have those very specific, unique demographic makeups, we've created custom comparison groups. So I think we have 4 schools: Future Public School that's in Garden City, Heritage Academy out of Jerome, Chief Toggy Elementary. Those are schools that we have worked to create custom comparison groups, but everyone else is compared to the district in which they reside.
So the yellow dot or orange dot is the average of similar schools, and that's how far below they are. And there might be yellow dots or orange dots somewhere else, but I can't see them. Are they in the other?
I think there's one more that is cut off on this slide, and I believe, I'm not exactly sure what school that is, but there's one in the margin there.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yep.
All right. Question, Senator Den Hartog.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Thompson, thank you for your presentation. I'm thinking about the renewal process and schools that have been around for quite a while versus kind of that first renewal, that first 5 years. So, understanding what it takes to stand up a charter school. When the Commission is considering that renewal application and process in that 5-year period, when we've made the contract, we've made the agreement between the Commission and the charter school operators, whoever that might be, is there an opportunity in there for them to adjust what they thought they were going to achieve, or the students they thought they were going to get, enrolled in their school? If you could talk about what that dynamic looks like, I would appreciate it.
Ms. Thompson.
Thank you. Chairman Thade, Senator Den Hartog. So the performance certificate, which is the operational contract, that is at any time the school can begin an amendment process. So they can come to us and say, hey, we thought we were going to have this many students, or we thought that this particular program was going to work and it's just not. We'd like to make a change. And we have in our policy a couple of different ways to do that. If it's an easy change, we can just make that in-house. Sometimes the change is significant enough that it needs to go before the Commission again, but there's definitely a process for making those adjustments.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no further questions, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you so much.
Next, we have Kelly Edgington, Idaho Virtual Academy, and Irene Shaver. And you can introduce yourself and tell us what you're going to talk about, but welcome to the committee. Oh, Fisher, do you know how to? It'll be fine just as long as the print's a little bit bigger. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee members. Okay. Hi, I am Kelly Edgington, and I am the Executive Director of Idaho Virtual Academy, and I'm here presenting on behalf of Virtual Charter Schools. I was nominated to present at the request of we did this in the House Ed Committee, and Chairman Clow asked us to do it, and so we've come here to impart some information and answer questions too here. So thank you for having us. All right. Idaho has 8 virtual public charter schools authorized by the Idaho Public Charter School Commission, who you just heard from Jen. 5 of these schools include separate alternative schools. All of these schools are accredited by Cognia, which is the same agency accrediting other Idaho public schools. The first virtual schools in Idaho opened nearly 20 years ago, and the most recent opened nearly 7 years ago. So we've been here a while. So I've listed some of the most prevalent reasons students enroll with our virtual schools. Bullying has been one of the top reasons cited in my experience, and I know other virtual schools have found this to be at the top of the list as well. Bullying, as you know, can lead to students' grades dropping and even students dropping out of school. We have students who are behind academically and seeking to catch up. We have students who are advanced and seeking more challenge, including participating in advanced opportunities such as dual college credits. And have to give a shout out here to Chairman Thane and the committee and legislature for the opportunities that we have for our kids. Some students are athletes who need alternate schedules for training. Some families enroll their children because they have specific personal reasons or beliefs that they feel are better served in the online school environment. At risk encompasses many things, and I've already included, and many more circumstances than can be listed. A lot of individual situations going on. Our schools are really safety nets for students, such as I noted, and for many others. Jen mentioned the alternative schools and the different framework that the commission has put together for those, which is much appreciated. Our schools have alternative schools in them, as I said, a lot of them do, but those are also only covering a certain grade span of students. We have at-risk students who are in kindergarten too, and younger, and so we have at-risk students across the board, and I said a big mix too, so that's something to understand. A lot of our students are mobile, as Jen described as well. We have credit deficient students. You can read these too. Health impairments. Students with disabilities and economically disadvantaged, higher than state averages, most of the times in our virtual schools. We graduate students who have enrolled as their last try. We talk with superintendents across the state, and we've been told they send kids to us that they can't graduate. All of us have. I work with the school leaders of the virtual schools. Many of our schools graduated kids in 2020 and 2021 who wouldn't have graduated due to the effects of the pandemic, and we were able to graduate them and help. Idaho's virtual schools are held accountable in the same way traditional schools are held accountable. Additionally, virtual schools are authorized by and held accountable to the Idaho Public Charter School Commission. It should be noted that there isn't a lot of consideration of virtual schools' unique demographics in the federal or state accountability models. None really in the state and federal. The Charter Commission is starting to recognize some and has been understanding of different demographics too, and we appreciate the work that they've been doing in that direction. So when the pandemic hit, traditional schools had to pivot very quickly to remote learning. And really, my heart did go out to those educators that across the whole state, the country, the world. All of a sudden, teachers who'd been trained to teach and were teaching in a brick and mortar classroom, some for many years or even decades, they had to figure out how to teach remotely. You may have heard negative feedback about remote learning, and I just want to take a minute to clarify some differences between virtual learning and emergency remote learning. They are not the same. And I've got a list here, and it's in your packet as well. But we have, virtual schools have established delivery systems and established curriculum. We have trained teachers who, when they come on, they get some intense training, and then they have continuing professional development and mentors. Virtual schools also have established intervention programs. We were set up already with special education models. I even worked with a friend of mine from another school who said, "How do you do this online?" And I brought in some of my special education people, and we worked with them to try and help them as they were going into that experience. It's been a lot of time that we've spent learning these things. We had consistent expectations, and we didn't lose a day of learning when the pandemic hit too. We have methods for monitoring student engagement and attendance, and all of those things continued and were reported to the state as normal. So we were here last year when COVID enrollment surged, and we took those kids. Our enrollment lessened this year, but it's still higher than pre-COVID. Official fall 2021 state enrollment numbers show nearly 6,000 students, 5,912 exactly, enrolled in our schools from the fall numbers. We still have new students enrolling, We also have students who came in fall 2020 specifically because of the pandemic, who, for whatever reason, health, not ready to go back to in-person learning, and it's still kind of up and down out there, or they simply loved our schools, are staying. Our school's combined enrollment is nearly 800 students more than it was in 1920, which was the pre-pandemic year. One size does not fit all. That's why our schools exist and why we need to continue to exist. Thousands of Idaho students are enrolled in our virtual schools each and every year, and they continue to enroll. They might enroll for a short time or a longer time, depending on their needs, as I mentioned before. And so I just want to thank you for having me here to represent virtual schools, and I want to thank you for your support as well. And I also have a special guest along here with me, and her name is Irene Shaver. She is on the Idaho Virtual Academy Board of Directors. She's our treasurer, and she also was a learning coach for her grandson.
Ms. Shaver, please introduce yourself.
Thank you. Thank you, honorable senators and Senator Thane, for this opportunity. My name is Irene Shaver, and I am the treasurer on the board of directors for the IDVA, but that is not why I'm here. I've been a public school mathematics teacher for 39 years and taught from 6th grade all the way through college. That is not why I'm here. I received the Presidential Award for Excellence in Mathematics Teaching and was honored to visit the White House while Ronald Reagan was there. But that is not why I'm here. I'm a grandmother. You've heard of mama bears? I'm a grandmother bear, okay? My grandson was making very poor choices in high school and was not succeeding. It was due to his choices, and I was determined to influence his decisions. With his parents' permission, we enrolled him in IDVA, and that was my first experience with IDVA. For 2 semesters, I was his learning coach. I sat next to him in a chair for 10 hours a day. I did not do his work. I did not tell him the answers. I guided him. I coached him. I refused to let him quit. We kept coming back to those problems that he was having problems with, that he did not understand or that he had simply not learned about. He finished his assignments and took his tests and succeeded. But he was really working hard, very hard. His mother thought too hard. So after 2 semesters, he went back to the brick and mortar school. I want to tell you, he did graduate on time. He did finish, and we celebrated. While we worked, I learned about the excellent teachers at IDVA. I saw excellent support staff and counselors. I saw excellent leadership right there. And now I am very proud to say I'm a part of this team. I'll take any questions if you'd like.
Thank you, Ms. Shaver, excuse me.
Thank you.
Seeing no questions, I have one for Kelly, and that is, I think the Charter School Commission is getting some different metrics so schools can be compared with one another and taking in schools with similar demographics and different things. Are you finding that helpful at the virtual schools, finding that helpful as far as asking the right questions of what they can do to change policy?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the question. Jen has been good to work with, and she has listened. And the alternative framework, alternative school framework, I believe, has come about because of some of these discussions. And in the past, it wasn't recognized. I think it's more recognized now. I've had plenty of discussions with Jen. She does understand we have at-risk populations. And so I think that they're making great progress in that area.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see any. Oh, I do have questions. And Senator Den Hartog.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for a comment, I know when you were here last year and we were talking about the significant enrollment increase that a lot of our virtual charter schools took on. I just wanted to say a thank you for continuing to serve those students. I know there was a lot of unknowns for families and a lot of questions. I think we had a lot more certainty this year, and that wasn't through any fault of any school district or anything. It was the nature of where we were over a year ago. There was still a lot of uncertainty. So I just appreciate all the many different ways that our Idaho kids and families have been served. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Edgington, and for your presentation. And thank you, Ms. Thompson. With that, I think our agenda is over, isn't it? So if there's nothing further, the committee meeting is adjourned.